Hi, I'm Gary,
Yeah, hello, I'm Leon, the grandfather.
and we are Gary and
The grandfather.
Woo! Let's step up from last time.
Yeah, we're stepping up each time. There
Yes,
we are.
we are.
So, this time, a theme, I thought we would talk about family. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, why don't you start us off?
Well,
Tell me about your
you,
family.
you know, I have an old uncle
Mm-hmm.
who's 80, and he's still on the family farm. And I phone him every week or so. We have a big long chat. And now he's going to sell the farm. And it's worth, now in modern terms, worth millions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going to sell the farm, and he's troubled. He's having problems selling the farm
Okay.
because he's emotionally attached to the land.
Oh.
Because my grandfather, his father, came from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and before the First World War, and they were given a piece of land in the middle of nowhere. Now, today when we think about nowhere, we still think about a sidewalk, lights, this sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nothing. They had to walk for 4 days with their cattle to find the land. It was nothing, dirt and trees, rocks. And the first 2 years they lived in a dirt house, and then they slowly developed, and they eventually had the most successful farm in the area. But my mother told me, Gary, interesting, she told me they never had any cash money. When somebody would come, they would give them a chicken as a gift, or a loaf of bread, or so they had this the classic barter exchange, if you will. No money, right? So he's having problems selling this land, and he wanted to keep a quarter section, so that's a quarter section of a square mile, right? So a quarter of a square mile, quarter section. He wanted to keep that in the family, but it's useless because it's in literally the middle of nowhere still. So he said to me, he's going to build a monument to his father, my grandfather, that the old man, Theodore E015, came over from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and he farmed in this place, right? So I thought, and out of that thinking, I got, I was reflecting on this aspect, how important a family is, and if you don't have a family, in any stretch of the imagination, how much you actually suffer, right? And I know that in the United States, or in any country really, if you don't have a mother and father, and there's some ethnic groups, they don't have mothers and fathers predominantly, and they have nothing but chaos. Nothing but chaos, because you need those two pins, if you're ever going to have life, because you need the balance, because a mother is not a father, and a father is just not a mother, and they're not going to be, in your own experience, my experience, right? So yeah, this old guy is it's quite funny actually, because this year, because of global warming, it's colder in this part of Canada than it's ever been. I've talked to him yesterday. They still have snow on the ground. They have meter of snow.
Yeah.
And it was warmer. It was, I think, 10 degrees. So it wasn't below zero. It was 10 degrees, and it was melting. But there's so much snow that it's not going to come off easily. And he said it was so cold this winter that he lost half the cows, half the heifers died.
Oh no!
Yeah,
Really?
He said usually they'll lose 10%.
Oh.
When the baby calves, right? Usually 10%, but this year they lost half. And he said then the cows get very upset because they don't know which, and I know nothing about cows, but it's very interesting, that then the cows don't know which calf is actually theirs, you see, because they get confused as such. And I thought, what an interesting perspective on life and animals, and, so the animals weren't happy because it was minus, I guess it got down to minus 40 or 50 this year. Just a horrible winter, apparently, on the farm. So he's having to, now he's going to sell that. He's going to give up all of that lifestyle and move into the city, or close to a city or something. It'll kill him.
Oh, that's going to be a big change for him.
Yeah, I don't think he'll survive, personally. But that's part of life too. You got to accept these things. Change is part of life, eh?
So why is he selling at such a at his age?
Well, I think now because he can't do it alone anymore.
Oh.
So he'd have to hire a man, and a lot of young people don't want to be farmers. Like he asked me, maybe teasing me, I'm not sure. But I mean, he asked me if I'd like to come back and learn to be a farmer, and you know, like I'm not going to be a farmer. I don't think so. I think it's too late.
Yeah.
You know, as such, and I have no
see.
attraction to a farm at all. Right? I don't mind working in a garden and getting dirty, but then I like to go and have a shower and be clean. You know, when you go to a farm, well, you know that as soon as you're at the farm, you're instantly dusty, instantly, and I think you probably never get clean, really, until you leave, unless you're a gentleman farmer and you're Tolstoy and you have 600 serfs, right? But I think the average person can't farm quite that way.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
You know, so I think that's why. It's just the time of life. And if you just lease it out, then you don't get your net worth from it. And you lease it out, you have to lease it out, and you run the risk of somebody not leasing the land. It's like any piece of something, right? So it's this is clean. And there's an avid market for it. So it's in Canada. It's 2 square miles, but it's still a small farm. I mean, to me, it's enormous. You can't see the end of it. I remember that, but it's still a small farm compared to these huge mega farms. So it really, that's the farm business now, the food business, and these massive corporations are owning land. It's no longer the independent farmer in that sense, right? Tragic, but it's true.
Well, you were saying about the cows, right? And about family.
Yeah.
So here's something, it's quite interesting about families, but do you know that the only felines, the only cats who live in families are lions?
Again?
The
Really?
only, lions.
Is that true?
Yeah. That lions, they live in
Groups,
more or
yeah.
less
in
family
prides,
structures. Prides, yeah.
But the males don't live there.
Well, it will be a male and
Yeah.
then, multiple females. But they live in, more or less you can call it
A family.
a family, so to speak.
So one old guy and a bunch of females.
Well, that's what it is. But for other felines, they're solitary creatures.
Really?
So panthers and jaguars, leopards,
Wow.
of course, even house cats. That when you get house cats, of course they're forced to live together,
Right.
and they might cuddle together, and
But they don't like it.
Well, they might. Some do get
Yeah.
on well.
You
But-
have a cat, right?
Just one. Yeah, just one. But yeah, the only felines which live in
Group?
family structures, so to speak, would be
lions.
lions.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Tigers, the only time they get together is if it's time to mate.
Wow.
Rest of the year, they're
Really?
yeah.
So the female will keep the cubs for 2 years. Let's say.
I'm not sure, but yeah, let's say 2 years
and
or
then they
whatever,
go, and then they leave.
yeah.
Why would nature have created it that way? You think both territory? You think?
Yeah, maybe it's a territory thing. That they're very territorial creatures.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, lions, that's the only feline group that they live in some sort of a group, family structure almost. So,
If you go to Tanzania, you can actually see the migration of the wildebeests, right? Apparently, and kind of a funny aside here. I had a client, student, and she went and with 3 girlfriends, and they rented a jeep, and they rented a driver, and they went out into they were staying at a lodge in I think Tanzania, maybe Kenya, but I think Tanzania. But regardless, they went out in this jeep and they went over and they kept complaining, "There's no line. We can't see any, and we can't see any elephants." I want to see elephants. We can't see any elephants. They went over the hill. And this great big man's driving. Great big black man's driving. They went over the hill, and they went straight into a family of elephants.
Oh.
And the black man went absolutely white, and he whispered to them, "Don't say anything." And so they came up to them, huge creatures. The little jeep is there, and the huge. They came around and they used their trunks, and she said it was just a terrifying experience, right? Because elephants, of course, are big on family as well, right?
Yeah, I've heard this. Well, they even There've been some anecdotal situations where they mourn their
I've read this.
young.
They've touched the baby, and they've passed the baby back to the
Yeah.
aunts and everything, right? You know, so we're naturally, you see, Gary, we're naturally loving creatures, and we're naturally family oriented. We're not, you know, a third of Americans live alone. How's that for a statistic?
Hmm.
30% live alone, and you know, I live alone. But I know I'm very careful to have a lot of interplay, because it would be very easy to just be isolated in your own world with your books and your things. And the internet now is, of course, very pernicious.
Oh yeah, for
that
sure.
way,
It
you know?
really is.
Right.
Really easy. I think that's well, you know, for me with my family, that we're a very close family. It's kind of ironic because we don't live very close at all,
Yeah.
but we're a very very close family. And the my parents, that I consider them not just as my parents but also as my friends.
Wow.
Where
Nice. Nice.
I can talk to them
Yeah.
about anything I want
Wow.
without being judged. They sometimes they might not always be happy about
Of course.
everything I do
Yeah.
or everything I say,
Yeah.
or they might think I'm misguided on this and that, but at the same time, they will support me
Mm.
at the end of the day on what I do. They and they're very open. I can talk about anything without being judged or whatever. Though it's how do I say it? It's interesting because growing up, they were first and foremost parents, you know,
I understand.
which I think is, for me personally, is important
Yeah, absolutely.
to have that guidance,
moral
that
guidance,
structure. For me, I'm not a parent myself, so I can't. You know, maybe if I have children at some point, I can't judge other people who do have children, and can't judge their parenting styles because I'm not a parent.
Yeah.
I have no experience in that. But you know what I am saying though is that growing up, they did place restrictions on me, and you know, rules, and give me guidance, teaching me to do this and that and other things. But at the end of the day, it hasn't affected my relationship with them in any negative sort of way. That, you know, I got older, and it segued from the father or the mother and the son relationship into just a deep friendship.
Oh,
where
that's lovely. That's rare, you know, probably, right?
well,
I would think.
I would think
quite-
maybe,
it's quite-
yeah.
I think it's quite rare.
and just, you know, we help each other out with things.
Nice.
Like my brother and my father, they started writing children's books, for example.
Well,
But they wanted to. They wrote the stories, but they didn't know how to publish them.
structurally,
They didn't know how
do.
to get an illustrator, any of these things. So I helped find them an illustrator, and I helped to format the books structurally so they could get them published and everything.
Wow.
And you know, I did this all just to help them out, you
Of
know,
course.
just
Absolutely.
because it's family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We support each other.
Yeah.
We help each other out.
Yeah.
If there's any problems,
Yeah.
or if we need advice, any of us.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, you know, they'll ask me for advice sometimes,
Nice.
you know.
Yeah.
It just depends on the situation.
My parents,
Mm-hmm.
you know, were very black and white, right? They were
Mhm.
religious people, and there was a format to a pattern to life, right, that
Yeah.
that you didn't, you know, derivate from. But
Mhm.
one thing that I remember from growing up is I was a very, in a sense, lonely child, and I wanted to leave my little village and see the world, and I didn't know how to bridge the tiny village to the bigger world and all
Mhm.
that. You know, that the little high school to university didn't know how to bridge these things, and I had no one to talk to, basically. So at night, I would get up, and we lived in a fishing village, and I would get up and walk along the docks, and I hear the slap of the boats, fishing boats, whatever, and I would come home, and my mother would, and we'd late, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, my mother would wait up and talk to me, make a cup of tea. I hate tea. And she would make a cup of tea, and she would talk to me about life and love,
Yeah.
and I never forgot those talks, because they really changed my life, and they gave me the kind of self-confidence that you need in this world, Gary.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I really think that the 99% of almost all problems that exist in the world today, be it may the war in Ukraine or some other war somewhere else, or violence on the streets or whatever it is, it's always predicated on lack of self-worth, lack of self-confidence. So I have to extend myself through one of the big addictions, the big 5: alcohol, drugs, sex, money, power. Those addictions, right?
Mhm.
But if I have confidence, I mean, you don't hear of the Dalai Lama wanting to take over the world, or the Pope. They don't want to take over the world, because these are men of love and peace, for instance, right? So I think that's all about that. Family gives you that, right? The family creates who you are to that extent, and I guess lack of family would also be the same, in a way, if you don't have those guides. Kind of an interesting thought. The British Empire really comes together after the so-called Indian Mutiny in 1857,
Mhm.
and then until the 1947, where the empire, you know, in India was lost. So you have those 90 years. Well, most of those children weren't educated by their parents. They were educated by a boarding school. So the boarding school replaced the parents and gave them the imperial values,
Mhm.
rightly or wrongly, and with all the violence and sexual
Mhm.
abuse and all those things, because their parents were too busy running an empire. So the school system gave them the values, which the school system has lost. The school system, I think, for the most part, no longer gives values. Maybe in Finland, I've read that in Finland, the school system still gives the average citizen,
Mhm.
the average child, values, but not in the Western world, I think. I don't think so.
Well, just going back to you know how natural it is, the whole family situation, how it should be a natural thing,
Yeah.
having a family. Is I've seen numerous stories of animals like babies, kittens or puppies or whatever, being either dying at birth, stillborn, or getting sick and dying, or being rejected by their mothers, and then another animal, even of a different species, being used as a surrogate mom,
Yeah,
or
yeah, I've read
either the vet or the zookeeper chooses them, or in some instances, the animal's motherly instinct
takes over.
takes over. Yeah,
Yeah.
takes over, and they do it on their own.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
even different
I've seen
species.
it. I've seen this with animals like cats and chickens.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
like-
I think I've seen that with chickens as well.
Yeah, like strange,
Yeah,
strange. You know, absolutely. Can I tell you a story?
yeah, sure.
We had chickens,
Mm-hmm.
and there was one chicken with the bantam roosters, right? With this one chicken, his
Yeah.
name was Charlie, and he thought he thought he was a man. So he killed all the other roosters in the flock. It was
Mhm.
only Charlie, and we had a dog, Labrador Retriever, big dog, black, Max, and Charlie decides that Max is a threat. So any opportunity, Max would even come close to his family, his chickens, and he would attack Max. And he's only this big, and Max is huge. And he would fly at Max and drive the dog off. And Max got to hate Charlie, to say the least, right? So one day after Charlie had beaten up my grandfather, which is another story, really, Charlie had his back turned, and Max struck and killed him. And Max was so shocked that he had killed Charlie that he kept grabbing Charlie and shaking him and flinging him in the air, thinking that he wasn't really dead and he was coming back. But needless to say, Charlie no longer had a family because he was dead. So yeah, funny, very funny. So animals, right? The fowl are wonderful creatures, eh? Chickens, ducks, right? Lovely, lovely. So when it comes to family now, because my students, I have students that are 16, 17, 18, right? And a lot of them are from, if they're not from broken homes, they're from dysfunctional homes.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of them talk to me, and it's write me, and it's really at times uncomfortable. One little girl wrote me, "Oh, it's Christmas morning, and I always feel so great about Christmas, but there's nobody home but me." Gee, Christmas morning, it just pulls your heart out. I remember Christmas morning, and it was presents and gifts and family and dinner, and my sister used to come with her children, and it was a lot of people.
Yeah.
You'd have 15, 20 people for a Christmas dinner. It was a big deal, right? So what do you think the answer is, in a sense, Gary? Like, how are we going to help people get back to this state of, because it seems like we're going the opposite direction. People don't want families, and if they have a family, they don't nurture them, and all of those things, right? It's like, what do you think the answer is?
I think one of the problems in society, we don't place value on things like family or even other human relationships. I think that I read a story one time about a teenager, an orphan in Nepal. He was orphaned by the time he was 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And I think his dad left, his mom had died, and that was that. Just trying to survive on the streets of Kathmandu. And eventually he got a family. Well,
adopted. He was adopted?
No, it was other street kids.
Oh, okay.
Basically that they became his family, just trying to survive.
Wow.
And then eventually after that, he ended up, getting lucky. He was blessed, and he ended up getting picked up by I think it was after a situation where he got into a serious knife fight.
Wow.
But they realized this was a really intelligent teenager at this point. He had potential, and they ended up getting him, into university.
Wow.
And all kinds of stuff. Now he's an author. He goes around,
Wow.
speaks to people about his life before.
Wow.
But I think that you can't replace family.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, not all families are unfortunately not all families are the loving whole families like I was brought up in.
No,
the supportive.
No.
I've had friends who have told me that if they did things or that their parents didn't approve of, they'd be disowned, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just horrible, awful things.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we also need to look out for each other as humans.
For sure.
So
For sure.
you have your actual family,
And then you have the human family.
and then you have the other people. Maybe, for example, you have a family in your church. They can be a second family to you,
For sure.
or whatever. Even
Your club, whatever.
your club,
Yeah.
your colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've a friend who said that he used to work at just as a teenager, working at a pub as a cook, and there's an older woman there, old compared to him. She was, I think, 30, 32. had a abusive husband, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
One day that woman didn't show up to work because the husband had murdered her.
Oh, good God.
You know, so all the teenagers, part-time cooks and everything, plus the full-time people working there, and suddenly their colleague was
He's killed.
killed. They didn't. So not like they were like super close or anything, but it rattled them all
Absolutely.
a bit.
Yeah.
Because she was part of their
Their group.
group,
Yeah.
and I think that's, whether it's your real family or it's your group, we need to show some
Mutual love and
mutual
respect.
love and respect and concern
Yeah.
for those people. I think we've talked about before
Yeah. Yeah.
the mutual love for the people in your circle.
For sure.
Yeah, the people in your
For
lives.
Apropos to your story about Nepal, I watched a similar program.
Mm-hmm.
These Nepalese villagers, maybe 3 or 4 days from Kathmandu, and they had quite a number of children, and they decided that they had too many, and they sent 2 away to a local NGO, and eventually these children were actually, if you will, adopted by people in Holland, and in a brother and a sister and another sister, maybe 3 of them, and they were adopted by one in Holland, one in England, and the other one maybe in France. And then the story is about they all go home to visit their parents. They haven't been home for 5 and 6 years, and the parents want them to stay and get married and look after the farm. And the one sister who has stayed, the elder sister, she's now married, she has 2 children, and she looked 100 years old. I kid you not, she was maybe 30. She looked old relative to these the three that were away.
Yeah.
I mean, they looked like teenagers, young, healthy teenagers. And then they got to be highly pressured by their parents, please stay. And in the end, they didn't. They went. That was the end. They went back to life in Holland and in England and in France, and it was kind of sad in a sense when you have to make those kinds of decisions, right?
Well, that kind of reminds me of something though. Like where I grew up in the States, it is there's a religious group of people called the Amish.
Yeah, I
Maybe
know
you've
the
heard
Amish.
of them.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And I forget what the name of it is, but when they are, I believe, teenager, late teenagers, 16, 18 maybe, something like that. Pardon me, I don't remember the exact year, but the exact age. But they're allowed to experience the outside world for a period where they can use the technology and
Really?
experiment with
Whatever.
drugs or alcohol, smoking, whatever.
Wow.
Experiment a bit
Yeah.
with things.
Yeah.
And it's that time period, that coming of age time period. They can experience that, and then they have to make the choice. Will they come back and stay in their church
Or
and and that would mean they will get married within their community,
Yeah.
because it's all very localized as well,
Yeah.
from my understanding.
Yeah.
Or will they leave the community
Yeah.
and leave the church
And step out in the world.
and step out into the world?
Wow.
But if they do that,
Wow.
they will most likely never see their family again, because they will be
Wow.
shunned
Wow.
by their community and the family.
Wow.
It's totally their choice.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was reading, it might be something like 90 or 95% that they will stay. They will come back and stay. That only a very small portion, from my understanding, will choose to step out.
Wow. What would you do? You think? I've been back to my village 4 times in 40 years. Right?
Well, I think it's a little, situations are a little different. Where, for us, we can come and go as we please.
That's right.
And, we're just talking about location.
Yeah.
Whereas for them,
It's cultural.
we're talking about a cultural thing. You're talking about
Yeah.
technology and booze and
Yeah.
drugs
Yeah.
and unlimited sex and
Yeah.
automobiles
Yeah.
and flying on airplanes and
Wow.
electricity and computers and
Yeah.
tablets and cell phones, smartphones, and all kinds of things. So
Or much more humble life.
a much more humble life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you gotta be mostly just on the farm or maybe doing some woodworking and things.
Yeah. Religion, God,
Yeah.
you know.
So I think, well, in some ways, I think there's always that saying that you can't really miss what you don't know. What you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think in that way, if their whole life they're adjusted and used to this way of life, even the clothes that they are wearing are, simple
Yeah.
in certain styles. So if that's what you're used to for 16, 17, 18 years, for example, then, sure, maybe going out, it might be exciting for the week or month or however long period of time you get. It might be exciting. But I would imagine the culture shock is going to be so great
Yeah.
that in and of itself would be enough
To drive you back.
to drive
Yeah.
you back.
And I also think, in a sense, Gary, that you tell me if you agree with me, but I think as you age, and you've maybe been exposed to the booze and the drugs and the sex and the rock and roll, so to speak, as you age, that kind of inner lifestyle or the lifestyle of introspection is very attractive, because the greatest journey, as you know, is inside. And I mean, it's wonderful to have adventures outside and explore the earth, but the greatest journey is inside of you, because the only person you truly know is you.
Yeah.
Really. I had the kids today in a class, asked them to touch their face. Just touch your face. And they're all young girls. There's only a girls' school I'm at today, right? And I said, do you feel that? No one will ever feel that sensation but you. No one. Even when someone touches your face, which they will, probably, but they'll never have that sensation, because that's a private sensation. And that's why, and then I gave them a lecture about that's why it's so important to make sure your body is your own, and et cetera, et cetera. But that was not the point. The point is that we are isolated beings, and that's a very positive statement, which means once your family gives you that confidence to make this statement, is that once you realize that you are alone, that you're free to be who you want to be, right? You don't have to be this or that or something else. You can be truly what you want to be. And that's very hard to get to, right? And that's what I think families, by definition, should be reinforcing. Not that you should finish university, get a job, make some money. Old school, right? That's old thinking. Elon Musk doubled his net worth last year. Went from 200 to 400 billion. So come on. I'm going to get a job and save a few dollars. Nice to save. I'm not against savings at all, but it's in the big scope of the world, it's very pointless in that sense. When you see that kind of wealth, a much harder challenge is to take the beautiful you and make yourself spectacular. That's harder to do, right?
Well, the thing about family, I think, is that, and again, it's not always the way it works out. Sadly, it's not how it works out for a lot of people. But the way I feel about family, you have your intermediate family, your parents, your brothers and your sisters. Then you have your relatives. There's I think every family has one. Either the drunk uncle or the crazy uncle or the crazy aunt or whomever, that we all have some colorful people in our extended families, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're family.
That's right.
So
That's right.
you know, unless there's something really horrible going on, such as molestation or something.
Yeah,
I don't even like to
murderers
think
or
about
something.
that.
Yeah.
I don't even like to think about that.
Yeah.
But in theory, I think the family is family, and
Regardless.
and yeah, you might have your favorites, and you might have the ones who aren't your favorites, but you should still support each other and love
Sure.
each other and
Sure. Why not?
show your concern, your care, because family's family.
That's right. That's right. I was reading an article recently that Tolstoy had a big house and all those things, and he had quite a few children, but they would have not all the Tolstoys were wealthy, so every now and then at the breakfast table there'd be an itinerant uncle. He would just arrive and stay for maybe a month, 2 months, a year, and
Yeah.
they would feed him, find him some work on the farm, and that was kind of cool. In a way, just accept you. Oh yeah, Bob, how are you? Haven't seen you for a while. Yeah, I'm staying for 2 years. Really? That's nice, So kind of cute.
Yeah. No, but I agree. I think that's, I think especially, I think now, with the culture, Western culture especially, that the family is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. But I don't think that's good.
No.
That's
sure.
not a good.
No,
good.
for sure not.
It's not good.
For years at Christmas time, I used to go to my Polish friends in Krakow. They live outside Krakow. They have a big house, and everyone would come home, and they would have this enormous Christmas celebration, right? And it was very attractive. It kind of pulled me back to the time I was, a child, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
It was really wonderful. Wonderful to have those memories. But I guess the new family, Gary, will have a new dynamism, I mean, that's the way of life too, But I do think this bonding, especially the so-called high holidays, very Easter, Christmas, Hanukkah, Purim, I think these are important
Yeah,
times.
no, I'd agree.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, you just, for you guys who are watching, for me, I just think family is very important. Don't take any of your family for granted.
Yeah.
If you had any falling outs or anything like that, well then it's important to try to make amends.
Absolutely. Yeah, so true. Because family is family in the end, right?
Yeah.
No matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well.
Yep. Well, it's that time. So, Gary out.
The grandfather out.
Good night, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.